materialist analysis to justify an evolutionary approach towards reforming capitalism. Leninism went beyond such a minimalist.
This is such a weird dogma too. It has such this weird reverence for Lenin, and I understand Lenin was an insanely smart person, very a passionate person. His brother was killed by the Tsar, so he had a kind of a chip on his shoulder and wanted revenge. But this notion that um, Lenin applied the scientific theory of Marxism, it sounds like a fucking cult. And it's this weird Marxist newspeak that you can never get away with saying to normal people. It only happens, whenever they're in their little echo boxes. So let's continue.
Marx, Engels, and Lenin, with Stalin's own contributions as well. Despite Stalin's mistakes, Khrushchev...
God, I hate that too. Like the fucking Marxists always be like, ooh, the excesses, as if they only meant to kill 100,000 people instead of 2 million.
Years, such as Trotskyism. These strayed from the fundamental basis of scientific socialism. They would be denounced from there on, fading away, if not dissolving outright.
Again, it's that whole cult speak where it's oh, Trotsky deviated from the one true truth instead of they were all kind of fuck ups, and Trotsky was especially a fuck up. Trotsky ran away to Mexico. He fucked Frida Kahlo, the painter. There's a movie with Selma Hayek. So Trotsky comes to Mexico, fucks this famous painter. She ends up. Then Trotsky gets killed by one of Stalin's agents. Frida denounces Trotsky. Imagine that. You fucked a girl, and then she denounces you after you die and sides with your political enemy. So that's Trotsky in a nutshell.
Mao Zedong thought was one of the tendencies of DPRK, etc. Well, these all have good points and work in their own context, that being...
I feel like this guy talks about these weird ideologies like they're fucking magic trading playing cards. It's ooh, I got the Ho Chi Minh thought, but it's not as good as the Mao Zedong thought. The Mao Zedong thought has 6 hit points. It's so fucking lame.
Country they're developed in, and they're deserving of study. They don't have the same universality in application as Mao Zedong thought would eventually have. This also shows that Marxism-Leninism, while a necessary basis for building science, based upon Marxism-Leninism and Mao Zedong thought, is the application of these theories.
How weird is that? He's you need to adapt this science to different cultural conditions. Well, if it's a science, it's a science. It's not like you need to change the temperature that you boil water at depending on if it's an Asian culture or a Western culture. I mean, it's this weird cope
on a wider global scale. So Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong.
But I will say, the thing that right wingers need to understand is that people on the left are very strategic, right? They're willing to consider that. It's oh, we have to adapt to specific conditions to get things done, which is true.
Thought not just for its base, yet it was codified and developed by Lin Biao in his 1965 work.
So he's going to say, long live the victory of People's War, which is, if you're into Maoism, Third Worldism, that is the seminal work. Now, Lin Biao was actually a far leftist in the Cultural Revolution in China, had some sort of falling out with Mao, and it appeared as if he was running away to Mongolia in a plane that crashed. Nobody really knows what happened to him.
The international significance of Comrade Mao Zedong's theory of People's War, along with the work of the Black Panther Party, which is very important for us living in North America.
Again, this is such a weird LARP. This guy is, the Black Panther Party disintegrated in the 70s. I've met people who claim to have been working with the Black Panther Party. For all I know, they were feds. But, Third Worldists get really spurgy and fangirlish about the Black Panther Party.
By another 95 around a common understanding of the ideology, and had instead their own interpretations of the political, philosophical, economic, and military works of Mao. Marxism, Leninism, Maoism was an undeniable new scientific united theory was not synthesized until the
Again, this guy treats it like fucking Scientology. He's like this new scientific synthesis.
1980s. Through the experience of the teen nationalist movement, helped to spread this.
That's really strange because in orthodox Maoism, third worldism, they fucking hate the revolutionary internationalist movement. So I'm not sure what this guy's background is from. Like I said, I was kind of involved with this stuff about 8 years ago. I've never heard of this guy. He was a little bit late to the game.
Unified ideology on a global basis. Marxism, Leninism, Maoism has grown and developed significantly, serving as a significant force for revolutionary movements in countries such as Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, India, Nepal, and the Philippines. The last three.
See, now, and Maoists always do that too. They take these fucking obscure-ass movements. They're like, ooh, the Maoists in India, the Maoists in the Philippines. It's not like these are huge movements. There's probably hundreds of Marxist parties in India and probably 100 or so in the Philippines. You know, the insurgency ones are pretty small, pretty localized. They definitely don't have support around their whole countries. But you got cringy dudes like this, cringe lords like the fat white guy with the, extremely pasty skin who, idolizes these people. It's like a mythology. It really is. I mean, again, these are barely functioning movements. They're kind of on their last legs in places like India and Philippines. They're not around in Peru anymore. They're not around in Nepal anymore. But this guy needs like a kind of crutch for his faith.
Full term for third worldism is Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, third worldism. So long that the term is usually shortened to Maoism, third worldism. Third worldism is Marxism, Leninism, Maoism.
Okay, now that's not true. I don't know where you got Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, third worldism. I've never heard of that before. It was always called Maoism, third worldism. There was another group that went their own way and they started calling it leading like communism. They were a total fucking cult, but
was in a more advanced stage. The 1990s and the 2000s was a time when the Maoist movement was beginning to fall apart. Sectarian splits ensued and hurt the community. Comrade Prairie Fire took the theoretical work.
Comrade Prairie Fire was a heroin addict.
Work that others had done based on the idea of the global class divide and started the Leading Light Communist Organization.
Yeah, I was there.
Also known as the LLCO. Comrade Prairie Fire made a lot of theoretical contributions to the theory and practice of Maoism third world.
All right, so Comrade Prairie Fire. He was an interesting guy, very smart guy. I'll give him that. He was definitely spurgy, very spurgy man. And he had his vices. He's one of, I guess he was very like Marx in the sense that he never fucking held down a job. He was kind of always bumming off other people, but very good writer, very smart guy. I ended up having kind of beef with him because I didn't like the whole cult direction that he went with the LLCO and split politically with him. And even after that, right, I always kind of liked him personally. I could hang out with him personally, but when he started talking politics with that culty bullshit, follow the leading light, yada, 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 literally, he'd be like, follow the leading light. So Commander Prairie Fire, he'd call himself shit like that. It was so fucking cringy. But let's see what this fat dude says about him.
Yet he also sabotaged later on. Resistance in the first world is essential to Maoist third worldist theory, and pantherism is the best method for this. Who upheld a form of pantherism have enlisted Jason Unruh.
Jason Unruh, God, that dude was always cringe. Jason Unruh was just this weird dude, always on the sidelines, called himself a Maoist whenever I was around. He ended up joining the LLCO, but was in their orbit. But, that goes to show you what type of people that they associated with.
Third worldist, Darxenopia, myself, to safeguard and develop this theory further. Politics on a global scale. First world privilege has fostered an apathy towards.
See, I hate this shit. Okay, and I used to be super into this. So I was all about global equality, liberate the third world, anti-imperialism, yada, yada, yada. And what I find interesting in retrospect is this guy supposedly has all this fucking empathy with people he's never fucking met. Why not just have empathy with people around you? You know, like, I mean, there's plenty of poor people in the United States. I'm sure there's plenty of homeless people around wherever he's living. It would be just as easily just to, be a good person, right? Uplift the people around you, rather than this weird, like, moral grandstanding, emotional, self-righteous addiction of, ooh, I'm the one that's for the third world, and that's what makes me a good person. It's a cope, and it's a salty cope at that. Like, it's like, look at this guy, right? I mean, somebody else in the chat said physiognomy check, and exactly right. Now, if you just looked at this dude, you don't even need to listen to what he's saying to know it's going to be some fucked up, deranged bullshit that, like, is kind of this weird fantasy cope, right? Look at him, fantasy cope. That I just too long didn't read his whole fucking video. Let's continue.
Worldist.
Okay, and I'll say this too, that having been in this guy's head and thought a little bit like him, I've also since then spent plenty of time in the third world. In a lot of ways, the third world is better. Quite honestly, people call it a shithole, but it's less materialistic. You know, if you're a trad, so to speak, people have closer relationships with their families. And the other thing about the third world is they don't give a fuck about guys like this, right? Nobody's living in a fucking hut with dirt walls, caring about what this fucker says, or has it carrying anything remotely similar to what this guy is saying. But these guys have real problems, and they have a real life with real community. Not this guy LARPing about global empathy.
Along with populism, both right, center, and left, is
okay. Here's where he's going to go into his big moral grandstanding about how he's the real left, and leftists do this a lot, right? It's very performative, and since it's all very ideological, you kind of draw your social status based on having quote unquote the correct ideas. So it's very easy for people just to split off with different ideas and be like, no, this is right, and then fight about it. So here's what he's going to say. He's going to be like, well, the entire left, all they want is more kind of crumbs from the bourgeoisie at the expense of the third world. And this is what makes him and his kind of weird version of Marxism superior to everything else.
Is a form of global apathy. Western attitudes concerning Islamophobia are also part of global apathy.
Yeah, Kazbak on Discord, exactly. And I had this one experience, right? I was in a Southeast Asian country, and I hadn't been there for too long, and I went on this university trip to go to some fucking rural province and go take goods and food and school supplies to a small village or small villages. And what I found interesting is that obviously the people were happy because we're giving them shit, but you could just tell on their faces that they had a much more fulfilling life, and that kind of like the existential fulfillment. They had that, whereas I didn't at that time. And I kind of noticed there was this gradation, right? It was me being this kind of spoiled first world, or being the most generally miserable. Then there was the kind of liberal professor at this third world university, the foreign language department professor, kind of with his own kind of existential low grade misery. You had the students, the university students, kind of well to do. They were pretty happy, they were having a good time. But then there was, the villagers. They were dirt poor, like I said, huts with mud walls. But it wasn't that bad, right? They're not having this kind of mental torment that first world faggots like this project onto them, right? It's they're just living their lives. They're not online complaining on behalf of other people all the time. It's just I just can't stand this anymore. Like, it's like my whole shtick is I'm going to complain on behalf of other people, and that makes me a good person. It's moral grandstanding. It's kind of this gay new religion of the left.
First worldism is held together by the social construct of whiteness and neocolonialism.
See?
First worldism is the cultural conditions of first worlders who try to preserve their privilege by making use of fantastical worldviews. Every single Marxist and the Third World anti-imperialist movement over superseding, more important.
Yeah, again, it's this like moral flexing. Oh, I'm better than you because I support the third world politics. But look at the guy, right? He doesn't really have too much else value to offer the world. So this is his shtick. I'm better than you because I support third world people, even though my version of support is sitting in my living room on my ass, I don't know, in a kind of normie looking apartment with some books on the fucking shelf. I don't know how the fuck is he supporting anybody doing this? I don't get it.
Than petty first world issues. Global empathy requires actively combating Afrophobia, Islamophobia,
Yeah, like the support is all in his head.
Zionism, anti-Semitism, Americanism, theocracy, populism, Britishism, socialism, and
okay. So again, he's like going off this laundry list of things he quote unquote supports. Again, what does that even mean? Really? What does support mean? Oh, I have an opinion. Who the fuck cares? Nobody. I mean, it's so lame. It's so like infantile. I had a coach one time who told me everyone has an opinion. An opinion's like an asshole. Everyone has one, and they stink, right? And this guy is especially.
Communism. We unconditionally push for the pan-third world revolutionary struggle.
Again, it's his version of support is having an opinion. It's LARP.
Waged against the first world and its globalist capitalist superstructure. Pillar 2.
Mm-hmm.
Revolution and resistance.
Oh, this look, you can tell this guy's training for the revolution, can't you?
Resistance in the first world, revolution in the third. That is
oh god. It's all just sloganeering. It's lame, but let's continue.
A mantra for third worldists working out of the first world. Resistance in the first world requires pantheism and anti-fascism first and third world. So once again, to make all these positions clear,
all these vapid positions that have no bearing or meaning.
Basically, third worldists recognize anarchism in the first world. Third world.
They support anarcho tyranny. Okay, I get it now. That sound okay. Even though he doesn't consciously, I'm sure he does, right? He looks like a vax fag, right?
This recognize demarchism in both the first world and the third world. Third worldists also recognize Maoism in both the first and third world. Both Maoism.
I don't know what demarchist means. Does anybody know what this means? Fill me in. They've come up with new jargon since I've left the left.
And demarchism as valid positions in their own right. Third world, the global south.
So like they come up with this really convoluted position on Cuba and China where it's like, oh, they're social imperialists or social fascists or they're fake socialists, but we should still support them against the US, which makes sense from their own convoluted world like positions in their heads. But yeah, let's continue. Second world was considered the Soviet sphere in the like 50s.
And Africa is where the communist first world must look to find Christ.
And I find that interesting too, because like any sort of Marxist revolution that has survived past 10 years, they gave, they're like, all right, that didn't work. And then they introduced market reforms. USSR was the one exception to that. Yo, other Carl, what's up?
Oh, hey. Oh, I know this guy. I just can't remember his name, but he was on one of my streams like a long time ago. So I can clarify some of the positions he's talking about. So when he's bringing up the term demarchist, that kind of started with it was kind of like a combination of like some. It's hard to explain because part of it is like, the Jewish Bundist and the other part are like some Arab, nationalist type groups. So but they're like
their position. Is it just like pan Arabism or pan nationalism of the third world, or?
So what's weird is like the demarchist stuff is kind of like a patriotic form of socialism, but they want what they want is some form of Jamahiriya. which was like, you know, the direct democracy that Gaddafi talked about.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, okay, so they're in the kind of like weird. It's like third positionism for leftists kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just basically leftism with a slightly religious bent.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because
Interesting.
the primary YouTube channel that talks about this stuff would be Stone Soviet's channel, which he goes under Lumpen Third Worldist.
Gotcha.
Comrade Net used to release a lot of videos on this topic. He'd released a couple videos on this topic, but he does more on the ground activism, and he doesn't really do a lot of YouTube stuff very often.
Well, good for him. At least he's doing that. I guess I can respect him a little bit that he's actually doing something.
He's mostly done activism though for, like, you know, trans people that get kicked out of their homes and other people that end up on the streets and they go to squatter houses or just do like are they rescue people from sex trafficking rings and shit like that.
Yikes. Well, I guess you know, they kind of push the policies that create those problems. So I don't know what to say too much about that, but yeah, that's really interesting. Like I mentioned earlier in the stream that I'd say about 10 years ago was part of the Maoist Third Worldist movement, and actually
Are you serious?
Yeah, I actually helped. Me and a couple friends basically came up with the phrase Maoism Third Worldism, and I was friends with Prairie Fire, the guy he talked about earlier in this video, and eventually split with Prairie Fire to do kind of my own thing, kind of similar. But so that's the reason why I'm watching this video. I've never seen this guy before, and I've never seen this video before. You know, I find it interesting that people still talk about this, quite honestly. But
Kaz is backstage.
Oh, okay. Who's this?
Someone I know.
All right, let's put him in.
He's been